Hello, everybody. I'm here today with Suzanne Venker. Suzanne and I have spoken before. She has a series called The Suzanne Venker Show. She's a marriage and relationships coach and writes a lot for mainstream publications in the US. Very challenging, provocative articles about relationships and marriage, and articles that are very different from the typically anti-male hogwash, which has captured so much of her profession. Suzanne, I'm very happy to have you here today.
So happy to be here. Very fun to be on something live for a change.
Yeah, that's good. And we have a lot in common in relation to respect to our views on marriage and relationships. And I'm always pleased to see a new article by you taking on the new orthodoxy, which is controlling the
I feel like it's getting worse by the year. Worse by the year.
Now, so we're talking today about the whole issue of woke women and what the attitudes of woke women are doing to relationships and marriage. And I want to start off by getting you to tell the story about the husband store, which you posted on Facebook. Can you tell? It's a lovely story. Can you tell us?
Okay, well, I want to. All right, if I'm going to read this, then we have to qualify. Hold on. Uh-oh. You gave it to me. Do you have it in front of you?
I have it. I'll probably muck it up, but yeah.
Because I didn't actually write that story, and I think some people on Facebook thought I did.
I thought you posted.
No. Here it is. I found it. No, I didn't write that story.
I know it's not your story, but I thought you posted it. Yeah.
I know I did. I posted it, and then I had a lot to say about it. But just to
it's a famous story. Yeah. Anyway, tell the story.
So there's this store in New York City called the Husband Store, where women can only go to choose a husband, And at the entrance to the store is this sign that you can only visit the store once. And there are 6 floors inside, and the men's value increases as women ascend each flight of stairs. And they're permitted to choose any man they want from any floor, or they can go up another floor, but they cannot go back down except to exit the building. So a woman goes into the store to find a husband. On the first floor, the sign says, "These men have jobs." On the second floor, the sign says, "These men have jobs, love kids, and are extremely good looking." Wow, the woman thinks, this is great, but she keeps going up. She goes to the 4th floor, and the sign there says, "These men have jobs, love kids, and are drop dead good looking, and they help with the housework. Mercy me, the woman says, I can't stand it. Yet she still goes up to the 5th floor. And there the sign reads, "These men have jobs, love kids, are drop dead gorgeous, help with the housework, and have a strong romantic streak." The woman is tempted to stop there, but she doesn't. Instead, she goes to the 6th floor, where the sign reads, "You are visitor 3,261,496,012 to visit this floor. There are no men on this floor. This floor exists solely as proof that women are impossible to please. Thank you for shopping at the Husband Store." To avoid gender-biased charges across the street. And on the 1st floor, there are wives who love sex. On the 2nd floor, there are wives who love sex and who are kind. On the 3rd floor are wives who love sex, who are kind, and who enjoy sports. The 4th, 5th, and 6th floors have never been visited.
That's so
and that's
good,
the end of the story.
I love that.
I love it too. I love it too.
So tell me why you posted it.
Okay, so look, it was just an obvious, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out the message there. Women are very difficult and hard to please, and men are not. Men are simple, their needs are simple, and the more women think they can have, the more they tend to go after. And then when they get to that point, they're never satisfied and want more. I mean, that's the general gist of the message. And of course, depending on whether you have a sense of humor, right?
Which is very rare these days.
Very rare. I mean, you know, you would think that I said, because of course I made some comments about that anecdote, and that today we are having a problem with extremely unrealistic and high expectations, usually on the part of women, and that it's a problem for sustaining marriages and relationships. And you would think that I told women that they should just I said something like lower your expectations, and I made it pretty simple, but then I explained it in the post. But if you just looked at the meme, it said lower your expectations, ladies. And you would think that I had said, just take any old man off the street. You know, you shouldn't have any, even if he abuses you, that's okay. You know, like they just took it as far as they could take it. And that's kind of what happened.
Or any suggestion that women ever do anything wrong gets you into trouble, let alone the idea that they shouldn't aim as high as they possibly can. I mean, well, I totally agree with you about women's expectations, and it's something I've wrestled with and written about for decades. And as I mentioned, when I was promoting this discussion, I had five rather difficult years of my life as an online dating coach. I mean, it was very entertaining in lots of ways.
What was the takeaway?
Well, you know, and it started off as lots of fun, just the business of working, helping women write their profiles and so on. But then dealing with women's expectations was the thing that did me in the end, and trying to get them to get real. I mean, they'd come in with these huge shopping lists of things that they had to have in their relationships, and that they would lay out in their profiles. You know, I need this, I want this, I must have this. And I would say, you're not in a buyer's market, lady. I was dealing mainly with women over 50. And, you know, they're up against it in online dating. The numbers are beginning to really dramatically shift against some particularly well-educated women. And they had to sell themselves. They had to work out what they had to offer a man, not what they had to have. And boy, was that hard work. And you know, this sense of entitlement, this sense of
I
suppose what I find really offensive is their willingness to denigrate men. I mean, they see so little, many of them see so little good in men. And they're so on the lookout for men's faults rather than looking past their physical appearance, past how much money they had. I mean, they just cannot begin to settle. That term, to settle, is one of the keys here, don't you think? I mean, they really bristle at the notion of settling.
And the funny thing about the word settle is, of course, it sounds bad. You know, the language matters, and that sounds bad. But of course, if you're starting from an unrealistic place, then settle isn't a bad word. In fact, you could just say, instead of having inflated expectations, just have realistic expectations, as opposed to high and low and settling and aiming high or whatever. You know, you can change the language. But yeah, there's just no, I think the best way to get a woman to understand it, I have found, at least in my coaching business, is if you reverse it. I find that's very quick. If you reverse the genders, let's say I'm talking to a wife who's really, really, you know, upset because her husband is an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I reverse it and I say, well, what if he expected boom, 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 boom of you? And all of a sudden it's just crystal clear. Or whatever, it's not even of your qualities, but whatever it is they expect in the relationship that you should do or be like. You know, it doesn't work that way in reverse, because men don't have very many needs. They really genuinely don't. Be nice, be available, affection, appreciation, and that's about it. You know, I mean, it just
maybe a bit of sex, but that's,
well, no, the sex was, I'm sorry, when I said be available, I meant sex. I was including sex. Yeah, be interested in sex. If you're interested in sports, that's helpful. If you're not, whatever. But yeah, sex, food, being nice, kind, generous, selfless, thoughtful. I mean, really, these are human traits. It's just that for men, they're just, the list isn't long. That's the difference. That was the point of the husband store and the wife store, is that one's got a long list and one doesn't. And when you look at those side by side, if you're able to really look at men and women and their needs and your relationship in a more, I guess, detached or objective fashion, and not take everything so personally, you can see that there's a real disconnect there. That it doesn't make sense to have a huge laundry list and then this list. I mean, obviously there's going to be a disconnect if you don't learn to work with what those respective needs are. And unfortunately for women, it ends up being just the focus is so much on them and just not at all on men.
Yeah, but isn't that also something to do with the shift in power that's occurred in relationships? And I always feel that comes back to giving women the power to walk. I mean, when women
Yes.
entered relationships and were dependent on their relationship, had nowhere to go because they couldn't support themselves and their children. I mean, I always feel, you know, you might as well look for the good in that relationship because you've got no option. I mean, and I think when then the big dramatic shift occurred when women gained independence, they gained the capacity to support themselves. In places like Australia, they got this huge support network. The government really competing very effectively with the capacity of men to support women,
their families.
particularly the low income levels. Women do much better with the government supporting them than they do with, you know, the low income men who might be competing with the government.
And I like,
anyway,
go ahead.
Yeah, go on, Suzanne.
No, I was just gonna say, to me, it's so much about mindset, because the argument isn't about the law and whether or not people should be allowed to get divorced or whether or not women should work. It's really about your mindset going in. And I like to say that one of the most effective things for keeping a relationship or a marriage going is to take divorce off the table. And that's a mental thing, that when you do it and you pretend that you lived back before women could support themselves or before divorce was so available, it just puts you in a completely different mindset. And it forces you to have to deal with something that you would otherwise say, well, I don't have to, so I won't.
It's too hard. I'm out of here. You know, that's right. The door is open, and because that door is open, it's changed the whole nature.
Changes the whole thing. Yep.
And also with that, we also gave real incentives to women. I mean, okay, divorce obviously is a very destructive thing in all sorts of ways, but many women know they'll come out okay. Not all women, but lots of women will end up with a house, they end up with the children, they can deny contact, the father's contact with those children. I mean, they have enormous power in the divorce situation. Not all women, as I say, but many women. And so it's not such a dreadful option for them. And men know that divorce is likely to be devastating for most of them in terms of their relationships with their kids and in terms of their financial assets and so on. You know, you're right to take it off the table because it's there, and that is changing the whole nature of how people think about their relationships and how much effort they need to put into them. Don't you think?
Yeah, I really feel like over the last 30 or 40 years, so much of the problems that are plaguing, particularly young modern marriages, have to do with the way we think, the way we think about the other sex, about marriage as an institution. It's not just laws and just customs or mores or whatever. It's really this mind shift. So for example, one of the big things that I think is when I referred on that article to woke women, I'm referring to women who've been raised to believe, you know, hook, line, and sinker in the equality concept, meaning that men and women are interchangeable, that there are no real sex differences, that what one does, the other does, and that they're like partners instead of unique individuals coming together to form this union, and that they each bring specific skills to the table, that if you capitalize on that, as they're coming in a competitive way, where it's almost like they're roommates. They're not combining their money. They're calling the money his money, her money. It's not just separate bank accounts. I mean, the whole mindset is that's his money, that's her money, that's her debt, that's his debt. The whole concept of working as a team and complementing one another with unique roles. And that doesn't have to mean traditional, hardcore, inflexible gender roles. I just mean that you bring something unique as a woman and as a man, and that when you work within that framework, that natural biological framework, you're going to have more success than when you're trying to compete with one another and acting as though you are interchangeable, which is what I see all the time in my coaching business.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And yet, you know, there are real inconsistencies here, because in terms of how women judge the success of their relationships, they judge it very much in terms of traditional female framework. I mean, men need to become more, if you ask women what they're looking for in a partner, it's all in terms of traditional female skills. They want men who can talk to them, who are emotionally available. You know, they measure everything through their own ruler. So the man is in the good books if he regurgitates his emotions and talks about his feelings rather than doing something for her, like mending the toaster. You know, the traditional way men have shown affection and cared for their families isn't good enough anymore. Women have to want their men to behave more like women.
And then the irony is, once they get that to happen and they're involved and it's enough years go by, they're miserable. They hate it. They don't want that at all. They thought they wanted that because they were told that's what they wanted. And then biology kicks in, 10 years go by, and it's like, I think taking the trash out and mowing the lawn is sexy. You know, why don't you do that? You know?
I know. Well, all this, I mean, the housework issue is the classic area where the feminist narrative is constantly making everybody unhappy. So housework issue is something I've written a lot about and followed the research on, because the research is fascinating. Because if you ask people in the community, what's the issue that's causes most stress in a relationship? I mean, housework is always up there. If you ask men, would she think this relationship is fair? It's funny how many men will say no because she thinks I don't do enough housework. I mean, they've really got that message across. In Australia, we had this survey published every few years showing how much housework men and women do. And, it's always these big headlines about lazy men and women doing the double burden and all of that. And of course, they never publish the figures on how much total work men and women do in relationships. And you find in America and Australia, everywhere, the same sort of picture of almost exactly equal. It's been extraordinary for decades now that if you combine paid work with unpaid work, we're neck to neck. And
yeah, actually, at one point, the men were up a little.
Yeah, I mean, the fascinating thing is if you look at the issue of the relationship satisfaction and the couples who are really happy together know that. They know he's going out and battling the traffic for 2 hours to get work, and he's doing. I mean, in Australia, we have a lot of women with children working part-time. And on average, for years, women did less than half the number of hours in Australia that men did. I mean, it's beginning to even up a bit. But couples know that, and they value that. They value the fact that a woman buys the capacity to stay home with her children because her husband works these long hours. I mean, that is part of the equation, and yet you never think it if you just looked at the housework issue in isolation.
Well, not in the media, that's for sure, because happy couples are thinking very differently from the way the women in the media are. And their goals are very different from the average woman in America and even in Australia, where the happier you are, the quieter you are, right? You're not pounding down and screaming for the world to change because you know that you work fewer hours in the workforce, but it doesn't matter because you are a team. And I keep coming back to that because that's really the key. If you think of what he's doing and measuring it based on what you're doing, you are screwed. You're screwed. Your marriage is not going to last. I mean, I can tell you that first thing because that is the number one problem that I hear and that I work with in coaching, where you're coming in with this mindset of his and hers. And that's why it's not working. So getting people on the same page is the answer. It's the key. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have this constant cultural narrative encouraging discontent. And that's you write a lot about that, Suzanne, and so many aspects of relationships. The focus is always on encouraging women to gnaw the bone, encouraging women to see themselves as badly done by. And it's no one, I mean, that's been the most fascinating thing. I remember, there was a famous sociologist called Jessie Bernard. She wrote a book called The Future of Marriage 50 years ago. And the big theme, it was very much the sort of start of second wave feminism, I suppose. And her big theme was that marriage is good for men, but bad for women. And it was all about, women taking Valium, women were stuck at home as housewives, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, that was absolutely embraced by the feminists of the time, the women's movement. And what is absolutely fascinating is so marriage has been turned on its ear, conforming to what the feminists say that women should have wanted, and yet women are no happier. That's what's
I know. No, they're worse. They're miserable because they're being taught miserable. They're being taught to do things that are opposite of what they want to do, and they're having to suppress their actual genuine feminine identity, which is to be loved and cared for and take care of their babies. And all of that stuff has been ripped out of women under this guise that you are only worth what you produce. That's and right. the feeling of, if I don't get a master's degree and a PhD, and if I don't have a really great career, then I am less than I am not worthy, you know. And it's just, that's so against what women naturally feel, because they are so connected and so happy when they are focused on their relationships, which is why after X amount of time of being in the workforce for 10, 15, 20 years, it loses its luster. It loses its luster. All they want is a happy family life, a happy relationship, a baby. That's just normal. It may not be for 100% of women, but it is for the vast majority.
And of course, we always used to know that that's what does it for men too. I mean, all the sort of stories about men on their deathbed thinking, well, you know, you never think, why didn't I spend more time in the office? You think, why didn't I spend more time on my relationships? And that was a knowledge that women had about men, that the men missed out because they were in the workforce and didn't have the opportunity to devote themselves to their relationships with their children that women did. I mean, it was one of the things we had up our sleeves. And well, we just chucked that out the window. We lost sight of that knowledge, that truth about the world.
I like to say we go from,
go on.
Go ahead. I was going to say we go from one extreme to the other. We just can't seem to find a happy middle ground. It's always this pendulum going from nothing to everything, or everything to nothing, or there's this huge, vast middle ground where most of us live relatively happily, thank you, right? And you don't ever hear about it because it's not exciting, you know. It's not, because it doesn't cause strife and but it's also because there is the real deliberate manipulation of these issues publicly. I mean, look at the childcare issue, where all the time the push politically, driven by the feminists, is that the solution to women, you know, the glass ceiling, women's advancement, and so on, is more childcare. That all women want to shove their babies into childcare and get rid of this burden of caring for their kids. And it's just not true. I mean, and actually,
go on.
I was going to say, I feel like they've kind of discovered that, and they've switched the focus now to the real number one problem after that is that men won't do their fair share at home. So now the spotlight is on, well, okay, so maybe women don't want to put their kids in childcare because we're trying that and they're not doing it. So, well, it must be because their men aren't doing their fair share. So that's why women are miserable. And of course, first of all, men are doing 3 times the amount of housework and childcare than their own fathers and grandfathers did. That's number one. That's on the books. We know that. Secondly, the real issue that women are facing when I say women, I'm referring to wives and mothers. Yeah. The real issue they're facing is that they have simply chosen to take on a life that does not work. And so because they can't make it work, the only person to blame is their husband. Well, I could do this if you were like this. In fact, I have a great, there was an article that I printed out just for today. I wrote a blog post called "The Reason So Many Modern Marriages Fail Is Due to Insanely High Expectations." Yeah. And in there, I quoted Natasha Smith, who wrote in some magazine, I don't know what, "Quarantine made me resent my husband and myself." And then the quote in there that I used is, she said, "I don't want JP, her husband, to do the dishes. I want JP to want to do the dishes." Okay. "I don't want him to occupy Jackson, their son, so I can finish working on the article. I want him to intuitively know it's part of our partnership to work that into his schedule." So this is a classic example, and you can find it all day long, any week of any year, of how women, because they have not been taught to understand that their husbands think and behave differently than they do, they're never going to be like you, which goes back to what you were saying before about thinking that they should think like, it's not just the being emotional and sharing your feelings, but it's also how you approach work and family. Like, so for example, the fact that men are very linear in their ability to focus is much better. Women complain because men can't multitask. Okay. That's one argument. You hear that left and right. It is true that women can handle more at one time. However, the flip side of that is that men are much better able than we are to focus intently on one thing. And that's extremely advantageous. That is a skill. We don't give them kudos for having that skill. We just complain that they can't multitask. Well, it's kind of a good thing not to multitask because it allows you to really focus and do one thing really well. And so because men's brains are that way, if you understand that, you work with that rather than expect them to be the multitasker like you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. I think that's essentially true, but obviously there is overlap. I mean, you look at the work on fathering and you realize that there's really solid research that shows men can gain a lot of the skills, as parental skills, that we usually associate with women if they're put in that situation. I mean, there are lots of men who are raising children on their own and becoming just as tuned in that circumstance, simply through being on their own, learning those skills without someone gatekeeping, without a woman saying, this is how you do it.
That's true.
I think that's one of the great revelations has been the work on fatherhood. I think we have to be a bit careful not to talk more, to put men and women in too rigid categories, because we obviously have flexibility in the way we can adapt to these situations. I suppose I spent too much of my life advocating that men can be just as tuned in as women to what needs to be done around the house and what children need. And in fact, the way men raise children is different from the way we do, but it's no less valid.
And there's a way to bring that. But there's a way to bring that out in them without expecting it to be the way you think about it.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, like if you want to get the best out of your man, you need to understand what motivates him. You need to understand what will speak to him to make him want to do that. If you complain that he doesn't want to do the dishes, what behaviors can you do that will make him want to, right? It's not just you can do whatever you want and expect him to do the same things no matter what you do or say, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You just have to work within that framework to get,
But there's also this arrogance of you can't let him go to the childcare center in that old t-shirt, because what will people think of us?
Yes, right.
Whereas he's going to get paint all over it. Why wouldn't he? Different ways of approaching issues, as I say, that are just as valid, perhaps even more sensible in some ways. We might put too much value on what other people think of us as mothers, whereas men might, or, get the child to take classic areas, roughhousing and playing with children differently and getting them to take risks in the way they play, which women tend not to do. Yep. I mean, it's all. So, I think celebrating the differences. The problem is, in the home more and more, women are ruling the roost. Women are making all the decisions about appropriate behavior and giving no thanks to men for what they do and when they do it. I mean, look at the way we treat men. Are working harder in terms of number of hours than they ever have. As you say, they're doing a lot more housework on top of their long working days. I once did some fascinating work tracking down the number of hours spent on leisure. Leisure time for married men has been shrinking for decades. Whereas once, when I grew up, men could spend the whole day underneath the car, tinkering, fixing up something, or out playing golf or going sailing. Hardly a married man in the world would be allowed to do that anymore. I mean, men are on a very short leash, absolutely controlled by what is regarded as appropriate behavior from the female point of view.
That's the number.
Yeah.
That's the number one. That's the number one issue that I deal with in my coaching business. Yeah. I mean, no question. And men will complain, or husbands will say, I don't know what more she wants. I do absolutely everything and it's not enough, or it's never good enough, or whatever. So they just sort of, then they respond. That's just it. When you're not giving, when they don't have space for themselves, when they cannot be with just men, which they need to be with just men, just like women need to be with just women, when they do not get the appreciation or the affection or the attention or whatever it is that they need from their wives, but they're just expected to be workhorses, well, you're going to get back crap. That's it. You put it out, that's what you get back. You've got to learn how to make him want to do those things for you and do them lovingly rather than begrudgingly. And that requires a specific type of attitude and behavior on her part.
Yeah. And determining what is appropriate behavior for who. The classic example, we have a famous shop in a store in Australia which produces custom-made motorcycles. It's like a sort of dreamland for men. And the guy running it talked to me about watching these married men come in during the week, maybe, you know, duck in after work on the way home and gaze longingly at these wonderful machines. And then they say, oh, well, I'll have to come back with the wife, you know. And of course, they never turn up. They never turn up. And they never get the bike of their dreams. Because women say, oh, that's too dangerous. You're not allowed to do that. And of course, what happens when they get divorced? I mean, what I always thought was so funny. When I was online dating, it's full of men who would love to have had a Porsche but are now broke, so they have a motorcycle. Online dating is full of middle-aged men on motorcycles, which I think says a lot about, you know, what they want. You know, just a bit of freedom and the fact that they wanted to take certain risks and they were never allowed to.
What's so unfortunate about it is that there's so few things that women can do to appease isn't the right word, and allow isn't even the right word, but if men have these things that they need, they will be those husbands that women are wanting them to be. That's what I'm trying to say. And they don't realize that they're their own worst enemy, the women, because they're not this simple thing of allowing him to have what he might have if you weren't around, you know, or to have the space, even if there's things that need to be done. Just give him an hour without bugging him. There are just so many little things that you can do that will bring a completely different dynamic into your relationship, and you will get from him what you're ultimately wanting. And yet I mean, a lot of times women just really don't understand that. You know, mothers used to pass this information on to their daughter, right? Go from mother to daughter to mother to daughter. Here's how to love a man. Here's how to pick a husband. Here's how to keep your marriage, right? You don't hear stuff like this anymore, like ever. I mean, I do. That's what I teach. That's in my work, but it's very rare. And I mean, I can see this is really scary because I can see passing on some of this sage, old time advice and wisdom. They literally never heard it before. And they'll sort of look at me like, no one has ever said anything like this to me. It's a complete revelation.
Do you go to conferences? Do you ever say this do you ever meet other counselors?
No.
They'd hound you out of the room, wouldn't they?
I know. Oh, I've been to counselors, so I know. And I know of counselors and I read their stuff. So I'm very well aware that they are not saying what I'm saying. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, because it's just absolute. I don't know. I can't even think of the word. Knowing what the language now is in marriage counseling.
Right. It's harmful. It's harmful.
You would drive them ballistic.
Absolutely.
Speaking like this, you know.
I know, absolutely. And then of course they have to say all these politically correct things too to appease the powers that be above them. You know, that's a nice thing about coaching is very different from counseling, because counseling is more clinical. You know, it might get into mental illness. That's not what coaches do at all. At least not marriage or relationship coaches. Ours is based totally on experience and research, and basically experience of having been there, done that. And here's what worked for me, or here's what doesn't work. I had a book that I wrote, The Alpha Female's Guide to Men and Marriage, which was part memoir, part self-help. That came out in 2017. And it went through explaining my own transformation in my own marriage. And it's from that and coming out on the other side that coaching really flourishes, because you help other people now do it.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, I constantly have people saying, where can I go? I mean, my marriage is in trouble. And I have such difficulty finding places to refer people.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Most coaches, I would say, no question, are female, aren't they? Still. Say
that again?
I would say the profession is dominated by women.
Oh, yes. You know, and
the chances are that, you know, I mean, where it's come up a lot with me is men say talking to me about how miserable they are, that they get constantly sexually rejected in their marriages, and that they go along to a counsellor and end up talking about housework. When the female counsellor takes her side, when she raises every possible reason why she's not interested in sex with him, you know, if I did the laundry, if he did the laundry, he'd get laid. I mean, that whole nonsensical argument. And that's what they end up talking about. And they never get back to talking about sex. And I hear it again and again and again, because, of course, half of those, maybe most of those women who are doing the counselling don't believe that there's any obligation for people to look after their sexual needs. That's just an anathema now, isn't it?
It is. And a lot of them are divorced themselves. So there's that. I don't understand why anybody would want to go seek help from somebody who's not been successful in the thing that you're looking to be successful in. I find that fascinating, totally fascinating. And then even if they are married, the truth is you don't know anything about their marriage, right? And you don't know, you don't know. And that's not what coaching's like. Coaching, you talk about your own experiences, everything's on the table. And what's kind of fun for me is that I'm so, what's the word? When you're online, you know, you can find so much about what I've written and who I am and what I'm about online prior to ever working with me, which is really nice for them, because if you go to your average counselor, you don't know anything about their personal life. No. You don't ever discuss the other person, their politics.
You should be allowed to ring the husband or wife, shouldn't you?
Yes, exactly.
Referral. No. Suzanne, it's been a great privilege having you here. I've enjoyed chatting to you, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tina. Great being here.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.